Hello, welcome to Why We Are Christians. I'm Stephanie Ericson, your host. Thank you for watching. Today I'm here interviewing Kent Philpott. Kent is a pastor, teacher, author of many books, and the producer of this show. Thanks for being here, Kent. We're looking forward to hearing your story.
I'm looking forward to telling it. I hope telling it okay, Stephanie.
Well, I know that it's quite a fascinating story. So, Kent, let's delve right in from the beginning. Tell us a little bit about the basics. Where were you born? What was your family like growing up? When was that?
I was born 50 days after Pearl Harbor. That's January of 1942.
Wow, okay.
My parents were really from the Sand Hills of Nebraska, northwest Nebraska, and they got wiped out of there by the Dust Bowl. They were farmers. And my dad's parents were farmers, and they eventually couldn't make any living off of the land. And so they took off for Oregon about 1940, 1941 to work on Liberty ships. So my dad went to work building ships.
So this was World War II?
This is World War II.
Gotcha,
right?
Okay.
Now they were from, the family really came from, origin were Normandy in France. There was a Philpott, which means Philip's son, who came across with William the Conqueror in 1066. And the Philpotts ended up in England. Two relatives I have to mention real quick, Stephanie.
Okay, all right.
One was, they're both named John. This one was Sir John Philpott. He was Lord Mayor of London for 2 years in 1388, 1389. He was a loyal Roman Catholic, and when he died, he gave £100 to be distributed amongst the poor in London. I've been to Philpott Lane, and there are 2 plaques there about him.
How nice.
The other Philpott was burned at the stake in the Inquisition in 1555. He was a Puritan.
Aha.
And they didn't cotton to that much at that period. And so this John Philpott got burned at the stake.
Ooh.
So anyway, they came to Baltimore originally. My dad's name is Vernon Clymer Philpott. And the Clymer was from a relative who actually signed both the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution.
Wow, so you have quite the pedigree there, Kent.
I
That's
suppose.
Cool. That's really neat to hear. So let's go back to Portland, Oregon. You grew up there, and what was your family like? Tell us a little bit about them.
My dad, Vernon, my mother, Zoe Kahn, they were bridge players, they were golfers, they were players.
Oh.
They were kind of a wild bunch.
Really?
My dad was a gambler, but he became, right after World War II, a Fuller Brushman.
Oh.
And he was a Fuller Brushman for 50 years.
Who remembers the Fuller Brushman? I think certain generation does, for sure. Yep.
He wanted me to follow in his footsteps, but I was terrible going door to door selling stuff. A very shy kid. You wouldn't know it now, but I was very shy then. And I had 2 brothers, my brother Bruce and my brother Gary.
Where did you come in the line?
I'm the oldest kid.
Okay. And were your parents, were they religious at all?
My dad grew up associated with the Baptist church, my mother in relationship to a Methodist church. Frankly, my mother never did become an actual Christian. My dad was converted at a Billy Graham crusade when I was 15 years old.
So when you were 15, that was 50s?
Yes,
Sometime
let me
in
see,
the
that would
50s.
have been 1954, 54 in
okay.
there.
Got it.
And it was actually about 1957. And none of the Philpott boys wanted anything to do with Christianity. He tried to take us to church. We refused to go. Sometimes we would go. Sometimes we would go.
Just to make him happy.
Yeah. And then my father and mother, they sort of got in a battle. My mother wanted to get us all baptized in the Methodist church. My brother Bruce did. He became later on the most sincere, dedicated atheist that you've ever imagined, and both my brother Gary and I became Christians.
Wow.
And we refused to be baptized. I don't know what that means. I don't know. But anyway, that's sort of what happened. And then we moved to Los Angeles in 1954, 55, to the northern part of LA called Sunland, Tujunga.
Uh-huh. Oh, wow.
At the very head of the San Fernando Valley up against the San Gabriel Mountains.
Ooh, hot country for Southern California.
Hot, heat, and smog.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Big time smog.
So were you thrilled to be moving to California from Portland, Oregon?
I don't know how you thought that, Stephanie, but you're right. California was the place you wanted to be. We had a friend named Gary Hawthorne who had moved to California, would periodically come back, and we just could hardly wait for Gary Hawthorne to show back up because he was from California.
Right.
California was cool.
Pretty special those days.
Yes, you're right. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit, how did you learn about God? What did, besides your parents, did you have people around you that were influencing you at the time, peers maybe?
As a matter of fact, yes. I remember their names.
Ah, great. Let's hear them.
Dale Haskins, Jim Thomason, and Marcia Halverson. They all attended a Lutheran church in La Crescenta. And I lived right around them. It sort of had me cornered. And I met them just as soon as I moved to LA. And when going to one of the Los Angeles City schools, Verdugo Hills High School, and I got to know them, and they would try to tell me about Jesus. And as soon as I started that, I started to pull away from them, and I got into a rather bad group as a result. I went completely opposite end of the scale, and I got in touch with some people. I ended up with some trouble with the law.
Ah, what kind of bad boy were you?
Well,
do you want to tell us some of your escapades?
Yeah, it was two stupid 15-year-old kids.
Got it.
We broke into a grocery store to steal booze, and then to haul the booze away, we stole a car.
Oh my!
And we got in the car, but we were so drunk we couldn't get the car started. And the first car that came along was a nice LAPD black and white. So it became a problem because I had a difficult time getting into the military. The recruiter called me up and said, "Philpott, we got a problem here," and they got my record expunged.
Oh,
the Air Force took care of it.
Wow!
And away I went to Lackland Air Force Base in Texas.
So you were recruited to go into the Vietnam War.
I actually enrolled. I enlisted, which we called you enlisted.
Okay.
And this was in 1961. There was no Vietnam War there at that point.
Ah, okay.
But I was a medic in the military with an outfit called 2nd Casualty Staging Flight. It was an aerovac. We moved all of the wounded from the Pacific Theater into the 48 states, and they were dispersed. And so in 1963, I first found out about the Vietnam War. I would sit up at night. I had the combination to the safe where the records were, and I'd sit up and read the records. And you'd walk on an airplane and you smell the burn wounds. Shrapnel wounds smelled funny too. Those flights that would come from Hickam Air Force Base in Hawaii or Tachikawa in Japan. So I spent 4 years doing that, and right in the middle of it, right in the middle of my 4-year enlistment, is when I became a Christian.
Wow. So where were you when you became a Christian?
Well, I was at Fairfield, California, Travis Air Force Base. And the way it happened was a little bit unusual. I don't know if it was unusual, but I was still, I wasn't any kind of really serious, kind of a weird guy. I considered myself a Southern California surfer dude.
There you go.
I was brown, and my hair was blonde, 12 months a year.
Yeah.
Grew up in Sunland, Tujunga. I hung out with one bad element over here and the athletes over here, but mostly I hung out with the Jewish crowd.
Oh.
People thought I was Jewish growing up.
Interesting.
And I would go to the temple There was it was a conservative synagogue temple in Tahunga. It's no longer there, by the way. And so I had all of these different groupings of friends, enjoyed most of the time. It was a gang warfare kind of environment. I never joined a gang, but I was in a lot of the gang fights because everybody in town had to go to Sunland Park when the various gangs would show up and word get spread.
Wow.
So I was a lot of that stuff.
So gangs were prevalent in you're talking about the 50s still,
We're talking
right?
about the 50s.
Wow.
A lot of gangs sort of stuff. We fought the Mexicans in San Fernando. We fought what we called the Buddha heads from Hollywood, and other assorted groups.
Interesting.
And it was something you had to do, but I really hated it.
So let's go back to Fairfield. You were at Travis Air Force Base.
Travis Air Force Base.
And now, lay out the scenery for us here.
Okay. You know, I'm sorry. I got
okay. That's
I got
okay.
off on it.
These
Real
are
off
important
on it,
facts.
Stephanie.
We like hearing more and more about you.
What happened was, I had finished 2 years of college before I joined the Air Force. I was bound and determined to get a bachelor's degree before I got out, and so I worked the night shift. I worked from 5 p.m. to 8 a.m. and Saturday and Sunday 24 hours, so I'd have my days free.
Oh, wow.
And I was going to UC Davis. I was taking a philosophy of religion class. Dr. Child, I still remember that little man. And we had to do a term paper on a world religion. I said, I'll do Christianity. Of course, I know all about Christianity. That much stuff, I had a hard time with this. I mean, I got something down on paper. I got a B in the class, I remember. But I thought I knew about Christianity, but I realized I didn't. I lived right next door to a church. The landlord went to a Lutheran church, so I went to this one next door first, then I went to the Lutheran church, and then a lot of the guys at the hospital and in my unit went to the First Baptist Church of Fairfield, where Bob Lewis was the pastor, the only pastor I've ever had. And I got conned in a way that I don't have time to tell you into being a member. Okay. I ended up in the middle of the aisle. I was too embarrassed to go sit down. I went forward, prayed with Deacon Al Becker, a tech sergeant, to become a Christian. But I didn't become a Christian then, and I didn't for 9 months. And it was during that period when I was wrestling with this whole thing.
What were you wrestling with? What was hanging you up?
I remember the battles that my parents went through, and about a religion. I remember the battles I went through in high school, not wanting to be associated with the Christians. We would go to midnight chow, and I would always sit with the guys that were stealing out of the back. We'd back our cars up against the dock, loading dock at the back of the hospital, and we were unloaded sides of beef and everything. And it was Vern Hogue and Don Etheridge sitting over by themselves. We didn't allow them to sit with us.
They were the Christians?
They were the Christians. And they were surgery tech. They were
excuse
kind
me,
of the high level.
Part of your identity, it sounds like at this time, was sort of that bad boy persona. You liked those type people. You wanted to keep relating with that genre. I
admit that I was a typical kind of guy who wanted to be seen as a cool guy.
Got it, right.
And you didn't want to be in association with these guys over here. So we sat here at midnight chow, and these guys would sit over here. This went on for a long period of time. And for reasons I can't really explain how it happened, but I became a Christian, like, boom. And all of a sudden I was uncomfortable sitting with these guys and stealing anymore. And I found myself actually being forced to sit with Vern and Don.
Forced in terms of your own conscience?
No, the guys, I think, realized there was something different about me now.
Oh, okay.
I was uncomfortable. I stopped joining them in stealing. I mean, we'd go down there and cook ourselves big steaks. We'd make ourselves big dinners, which weren't prepared for us. We just raided the place. And I stopped doing that. I don't know why. I just stopped doing that. And so eventually I hung out with them, and they became friends. longtime friends. I haven't heard anything about him in many years. And once I became a Christian, every time I had the opportunity, I was at church.
Well, let me just back up a slight bit there. You said you became a Christian sort of all of a sudden, but yet you'd been having this wrestling. You were wrestling with the whole idea for a while.
Right.
When you became a Christian all of a sudden, what happened? Did you suddenly just decide to invite Jesus into your life, or did Jesus appear to you in a vision? Tell us, can you give us a little bit of background there?
There wasn't. I didn't have any prayer.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have any vision.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't anything dramatic happen
Okay.
that I am aware of. It's just that at one point I wasn't a Christian, and then at another point I was a Christian, and my attitude changed about Christians. I wanted to be around them. I was now interested in the Bible. I remember one time taking the Bible, and we had a Bible in this little apartment, my first wife and I. And my wife had become a Christian early on when she was 15.
So she was a bit of an influence on you as well.
Somewhat.
Somewhat. Okay.
Somewhat.
And you were married when you were going
Yes.
to Travis. Okay.
And I remember taking the Bible. I would try to read the first chapter of the Bible, Genesis.
Right.
There was something about it, I couldn't do it, and I remember going, "This is the Bible," and throwing it across the room against the wall and saying, "I don't want to see that book ever again."
Wow.
Well, so the dramatic change was, now I wanted a Bible. I didn't have one. Now I wanted one, and I started reading, and I started reading. And then I would listen to Billy Graham on the radio. And I mailed in and got the Haley's Bible Handbook that the Billy Graham Association was sending out. And I got that, and I read over that over and over and over again. I wore the thing out. I wish I still had that little book. So I was reading the Bible all the time. I was still only able to go to church about every third Sunday. But whenever I had a chance, I would go to prayer meeting. I mean, can you imagine cool dude Philpott going to a prayer meeting? But I did, and I loved it.
Great.
And I would go to the business meetings. I would go every time I had a chance, everything. I'd go to Sunday school, and then I'd stay for the service. I'd come back in the evening. On the Sundays I was free, and I was there for training union and for the evening service. And
now let me just ask you, because you've been a pastor for quite a while as well. Have you noticed that when someone is converted, they have this new interest in the Bible and can read the Bible and understand it in a way that they couldn't before?
Right. Not that I understood it all right away, but I have noticed this over and over and over in the 45 years that I've been an actual pastor of real churches. And it's always a sign of conversion to me to see this.
Right.
To see this person who had no interest, zero, or their interest was to read it to prove that the Bible was wrong.
Right.
Once in a while you run into these folks.
Of course.
And but yeah, I have noticed that, and to me it's always an indication that something real has taken place here.
Now, did people start to see this change besides the guys that were stealing the great steaks? Were there other people that started to see this change in you in your small circle? For instance, your wife. Did you have any kids at this point?
One.
Okay.
And by that time, two.
Okay. And you have how many kids total?
I have 5 kids.
Okay.
And that was Dory and Grace.
Okay.
And yeah, my wife Bobby began to notice.
Ah.
And we would go to church together. The people in my unit, from the commander, first sergeant, to the guys that I worked with, they began to notice. I never had any trouble from the commander, who's always a first lieutenant or a captain. I never had any trouble with the first sergeant. In fact, the one first sergeant, Sergeant Calhoun, what a wonderful guy it was. They were going to change my schedule. they were going to change my schedule, and I went to Sergeant Calhoun and I said, I really need to keep going to college, and I keep and so he made sure, and as long as he was there, I was safe of getting bumped around in the organization. But a lot of the other airmen, a lot of the other medics, and some of the nurses were really a problem. I remember one time, it was in the Air Force Times and it was on television, local television. They were twin nurses, ladies, women. They were twins and they were both Christians. And they came to our unit, which was a building aside from the main hospital. And I would go down late at night, everybody's in bed, all the medics, if they could find a place to sleep, they were done. Everybody's asleep, and I would go down and spend hours talking to one of these nurses, because there'd only be one on at a time.
Sure.
And so I had this really wonderful Christian fellowship
Nice.
with these nurses. I cannot remember their names. I can see them in my mind's eye right now. They were identical twins.
Wow.
And they were a big deal. The Air Force pumped them up quite a bit, But I lost the fellowship that I had with the other medics. None of them were Christians. And it was interesting, you could see the distance, going. And then they had another reason to be angry with me, because they would have contests. It was what we called a wing, part of called a wing. And they have these contests, Airman of the Month. And then Airman of the Quarter. And I won. Sergeant Calhoun put me up. I won all of these, and I won a stripe. I won my third stripe.
Wow.
Because I won.
Right.
I got all kinds of stuff from merchants in Fairfield. They gave us all kinds of stuff. We got gift certificates.
What were some of the things you had to do? Did you have to fly? Or?
No. You had all you had to do
you were
was
a medic, so.
You just went and answered questions. They kind of drilled you. You go before a board of these people, very tense. You had to be really slick, your uniform, your shoes, ultra spit shine, all that stuff. And I just did it right. I had all the answers I knew about. They asked you a lot of details about what went on in the base and what outfit you're part of in the wing and how they related and what. And so I had all that down. It was pretty easy because I got drilled by the people in my unit, but there was a lot of jealousy. So not only had I become a Christian, but also I gotten that stripe, which elevated me higher rank than they were.
Oh, that's scary.
Did not set well.
Now, during this time, you were a pretty young Christian at this point.
I became a Christian when I was 21.
And how old were you when you got out of the service?
I was 23.
Okay, so right around in there. Were you doing any witnessing or anything like that, or was this just something that there was just the change in your behavior that set you apart?
Well, somehow or another, I came to the attention of Pastor Lewis. Now, I started singing in the choir right away. Which I tell everybody, sing in a choir and sing loud. I had a spontaneous pneumothorax when I was 16 years old. I spent my 16th year birthday in Glendale Memorial Hospital. The day I got my license, I was 15 and a half. My dad got it for me 6 months earlier because he needed me to deliver the Fuller brushes for him. I crashed into a car the very day. And 6 months later, my lung collapsed.
Wow.
And so the singing made my lungs recover. I was always a little bit sickly. I was always a little bit underweight for a long time. And singing gave me a loud voice, made me strong, and it was very good for being a preacher later on.
Of course.
So I sang in a choir, and then I got asked to sing, to lead a Sunday school class, and one of the pastor's sons, Sammy Lewis, was in my Sunday school class, so I had to do really good with the pastor's kid in my class. Then one day I got asked, Pastor Lewis was preaching a revival. This guy was so wonderful. He died just recently. Wonderful man. And he had to be away, and he took his turn in the Ministerial Association of preaching at the Juvenile Hall in Fairfield. Still there. I passed it not too long ago. And he asked me to preach there. And so I did.
Wow. You never preached before, right?
No. There was no place to sit down. The room was about twice as big as this. Hundreds of kids in there. They were all around me, and I'm speaking.
So you were between 21 and 23 at this point.
I'm probably 22 now.
Okay.
And for the first time, I asked if anybody here wanted to become a believer in Jesus. Every kid there raised their hands.
Wow, every kid.
There was probably about 150 of them.
Wow. So kids meaning in their teens?
They're in their teens.
Okay.
So that was my first time I ever preached. And then we had a mission in Sassoon, which was a little town right next to Fairfield. They were starting a mission there, and I went and preached. Pastor Lewis asked me to preach there. And my sermon started at 11:30. I preached everything I knew. Everything I knew. And I was done at 11:35. 5 minutes. And I drove back to the church in Fairfield, and I went up and sat in the balcony, and I was up there, and Pastor Lewis looked up there, and he saw me there, and what are you doing there? You're supposed to be in Sassoon preaching. We laughed about that for a long time.
I guess. So the congregation had a few extra minutes that Sunday morning, huh?
Yeah. I mean, Stephanie, one of my things is I love to teach people to preach. And some of those experiences were very good for me because I literally preached everything that I knew to say, and I did it in 5 minutes without exaggeration. And I left. I just left. I got out, got in my car, and drove back.
So Kent,
I don't know what they did.
Okay, you said everything you had to say in 5 minutes. So does that mean you didn't know that much about Christianity, or does that mean you talk really, really fast?
No, it means that I didn't know very much.
Got it. That's kind of what I was thinking. Well, Kent, your story is fascinating. Really is, and it's so real, which is why We Are Christians are all about. Sharing our very real Christian lives to encourage and for encouragement and growth. So thank you for this first part and telling us how you became a Christian. This next section is going to be about the walk Kent has with God and the very interesting twists and turns that it takes. So please do stay with us. See you soon.